Hi there. So this talk is called How to Learn Leadership Faster. And I'd like your feedback, please. I'm watching you. How do you feel about that? Maybe you're okay with it. Maybe you like it. I'm not talking about being noticed. I think probably most of us want to be noticed and heard and valued. I'm talking about being watched. It's getting a bit creepy now, isn't it? Well, it turns out that we've got a strange relationship with being watched. See, in some situations we're okay with it, but in others we're not okay with it. It starts feeling a bit awkward and a bit creepy. I mean, take a look at the person next to you. I mean, they've been watching you already, and you didn't get creeped out with them so far. So we're being watched all the time, really, aren't we? On the bus, on the train, down the street, at work. And of course, as parents, our kids watch us, probably more than we know. Every belief and behaviour, every response that we give just acts as a blueprint on those young minds. Well, what about this? If it meant you could get better at your job, would you be okay with me watching you whilst you were working? In the world of aviation, pilots undergo annual observations and they're called recurrents. And pilots can experience up to 24 hours of observation per annum. And for many pilots, like my cousin Nick, it's really the best way to learn. Many years ago, when Nick had just qualified as an instructor, he walked into the simulator rig one day to find two of the most experienced Hercules C-130 pilots in the RAF, waiting for their recurrent. Now, these two guys had racked up over 20,000 flying hours together. You name it, they had flown it. Combat operations, peacetime missions, they'd travelled the world side by side in the cockpit of this iconic military transporter aircraft. And after spending so long flying together, they'd sort of developed their own ways and practices of doing things. Along comes my cousin, a fresh faced rookie instructor, to conduct their observation. He observes them doing their own thing, which wasn't in line with some of the protocols of accepted best practice, and my cousin has to mention it fairly and professionally. Well, on the first day, he got told to shove his observations up his arse. On the second day, he got told to shove his observations up his arse. But day three came round and the pilots were again flying in the simulator, and through sheer irony, they fell foul of their special way of doing things. And it resulted in them crashing the plane in the sim. One of the highly decorated pilots stands up and storms out of the simulator. And after some moments of silence, the remaining co-pilot finally reaches the all-important confession point. Okay, he said, let's talk about what I need to do now so that this never happens again. You see, by crashing their plane in the sim, these two pilots had experienced the emotional anchor that's needed to make the learning stick. Some things can only really be achieved through observation and realization, not on a course. These pilots had a huge ego block to being observed, and yet they experienced the most powerful realization coming through it. Do you see how the emotional experience of being watched, the thing that we fear, the thing that's awkward, well, that's exactly the thing that makes the learning stick. It turns out observation is a really powerful way for us humans to learn stuff. And I think that's because observation has two special components. And the Herc pilots experience both of these. The first one is it's immediate. It's not like in a classroom or a book where you store up the knowledge and then you use it later. That's what I call a big learning gap. I mean, knowledge is like fresh food. If you don't use it, it goes off. Observation has a tiny learning gap where you know it and you do it and it's all wrapped up in the same moment. And the second special component of observation is that it's an emotional experience to be watched, going through the realization in the moment, and that means it's sticky. The night I asked my girlfriend to marry me, I still recall the way that the moonlight cast a silvery path across the Mediterranean Sea, all the way to the horizon, and the warmth and the smell of the Cypriot breeze as I began my well-rehearsed spiel. "Once you've finished that glass of champagne," I said, "I'm going to ask you to marry me." Always one for a challenge, she downed the champagne in one. "Go on then," she offered. So I took one knee. "Would you do me the..." You know how it goes here, folks. And then we got naked and went swimming, and guaranteed there were 3 full moons out that night, much to the amusement of the other 2 couples making out on the sunbeds on the beach. And that was 20 years ago. Still very vivid to me. Emotion's recorded in our deep limbic brain, and it acts as an anchor to enhance our powers of recall. Joy, rage, and insult, and pain, and surprise, and yes, love. Let's test this out. Try turning to the person beside you and telling them the name of your first crush. It's an immediate recall, isn't it? Just out of interest, did anyone hear their own name being said right then? If you did, take a feel-good moment for you, my friend. You get to bask in the glory of being someone's first crush. So observation integrates the 2 magic learning components, real time and emotion, and that just works really well to help us learn stuff. And we see it all around us. Take the world of elite sport. Observation is a cornerstone of the coach-athlete relationship. I mean, you wouldn't expect to see Serena Williams in any tennis Grand Slam without her coach, Patrick Mouratoglou, in the VIP area. Of course you wouldn't. And what about the half-time conversation in the dressing room of one of the world's most successful teams, the New Zealand All Blacks? What do? Well, in the first few minutes, the players congregate, grab a drink and have a chat amongst themselves. But then they break into the backs and the forwards, 2 groups, and whilst the coaches ask questions along the lines of, "What are you seeing here? What are you experiencing and doing?" And then the head coach might show them 1 video clip and a short observational message before they head out for the second half. No uplifting, inspirational speeches, rarely any blow-ups, simply instant observation, reflection, and action. And then the number of times the All Blacks go and demolish the opposition in the second half. And in education, Professor Matt O'Leary is leading the movement for using teacher-on-teacher lesson observations as a way of simply helping teachers and lecturers to improve their quality. Matt's one of the directors of C-Space, which is an educational research facility in Birmingham. And he's realised that when observations are used as a weapon of judgment and grading and assessment, just like the traditional Ofsted inspections, then there's very little improvement in teacher quality. It just serves to increase stress, nervousness, and unfairness, so that teachers put up barriers. So what Matt and his colleagues are helping to do is to help teachers to break down these barriers and turn observation from something that was disliked into a collaborative learning opportunity that teachers can choose to participate in. And once they're able to accept that clunky awkwardness and get over it, with a bit of work refining their coaching skills, teachers are reporting record levels of engagement. One of the participants in his research, who's a lecturer from a big English university, described peer observation like oxygen. Observation's given us the oxygen to breathe, they said. And when you're given the oxygen, it helps to breathe new life into your thinking and your teaching. So if observation's such a powerful way to learn, how comes leaders aren't champing at the bit to be watched? You see, for more than 2 decades, I've been both a leader and now a leadership coach. And yet there's still so much resistance to observation. Now, I don't want to say observation, I don't mean the superficial platitudes that leaders get from those 360-degree feedback exercises. I mean proper impartial development conversations with someone you trust by your side whilst you're working. And whilst you're working, those coaching moments are woven into the day. Well, you have a think. Why do you think leaders might resist observation? Well, for my part, experience tells me that leaders fear the pain that will outweigh the benefit. And it's not surprising when you think of organisational culture as such often a power game. The best leaders tend to be those that are adept in the subtle art of politics and positioning and perception. And just like any power game, there are going to be winners and losers, weaknesses to be exposed and leveraged for gain. All of this behaviour is what Mara and Steve Klemic, the founders of the Heartstars philosophy, would call below the line, self-promoting, ego control and competition and striving so that I win and you lose. And why would any such leader in this power game willingly expose themselves to the vulnerability of being observed? To admit blind spots or to have to face up to a personal weakness, well, it might be used against them. So I think the resistance is in that. And there are personal resistances and cultural obstacles stopping leaders from feeling 100% comfortable using observation for their development. But get over it we must. We owe it to our employees to become better leaders and faster. And we owe it to ourselves to innovate and ask that question, how can we do this better? Not just for innovation's sake, but when 2/3 of leaders who attend leadership development programs return to work and confess that their behaviour didn't change, we owe it to ourselves to try something new. If we get this right, the prize is great. It's huge for leaders and organisations who can harness this transformative power of observation. And one of the organisations doing that and exemplifying real and rapid learning is NextJump. And they're a $2 billion e-commerce platform headquartered in New York City. And the two CEOs, Charlie and Megan, have built a world-class learning culture based on deep awareness of their employees' blind spots. And at NextJump, they call them their backhands. Now, ultimately, NextJump has become a vehicle for people development and revenue, not just revenue. And in a sector that suffers from 40% and above labour turnover, a high churn of people, NextJump's turnover is practically nothing. NextJumpers love their organisation, and it's a place where time spent developing people is the business. It's not something bolted on, extra tasks to do like it is in so many other institutions. Now, NextJump have got loads of initiatives that have brought them to the world's attention when it comes to this learning culture. And one of them I'd like to share with you is very much based on observation. It's called Talking Partners. And it's a trusted, everyone is paired up with a talk partner, and basically you act as each other's trusted confidant and sounding board and friend. And you create a tight relationship through which to navigate the adversity and the vulnerability of growing through your blind spots and knowing your blind spots that observation brings through being part of this culture. And when you bring your blind spots and you grow, that's the thing that's rewarded and valued by the company. And yet you see how that's avoided by so many other organisations. I mean, can you imagine sharing an emotional journey at work with someone who has your back and you've got theirs, no matter whether they're having a good day or a bad day? But these talking partners aren't just there to be your best mate or to hit the gym with you. They're there to push you. And if you're in a leadership position, they observe you and they challenge you with the feedback you need rather than what you'd like to hear. They give you the tough love necessary to ensure you're in the stretch zone, to make sure you're out of your depth, both personally and professionally. And you do the same for them, because feeling uncomfortably supported is exactly where the learning is. It's in real time and it's emotional, just like observational learning should be. There's no practice field and there's no simulator at NextJump. All the learning is live, and that puts pressure on, it makes it emotional. So observation, with its zero learning gap and emotional glue, it's empowering pilots to fly planes better. It's helping teachers to educate better. Elite athletes are winning. And of course, in organisations like NextJump are becoming places to work where every employee feels engaged and appreciated. And if it's going to work for leaders, the common principles that run through all of those areas need to hold true. Trust built on togetherness. And truthful and sometimes difficult personal realisation. And the third one is always with the positive intent of personal growth. Not using observation to judge, to grade me, or to performance manage me. It's just in the service of my learning and my growth. And if you believe, as I do, that our future depends on better quality leadership, and it's time for us to step up, and that takes courage. Because hiding behind the numbers and the output and the heavy workloads we have and ego is just delaying and avoiding the hard work of self-development. You know, if you want to be a leader who inspires people to be wiser, you want to be wiser, you want to be more connected to others, you want to bring people and resources together to achieve phenomenal things that are far greater than the sum of its parts. And seek the discomfort. Be open to observation and invite someone you trust to watch you.